outstanding communicator, an outstanding negotiator. 0 being bloody hopeless, okay? Rate yourself very quickly on each of those 4 key skills, starting with communication. 0 to 10, be honest with yourself right now. Where are you on a scale of 0 to 10? Hopeless, 10, outstanding, somewhere in between. Just be honest with yourself. And do that for each of those 4 key skills. 0 to 10. Now, if you say you're a 10 already in communication, then the challenge with that, you may be outstanding already, but the challenge with that is how you're going to improve what you are, okay? So be honest with yourself. Some of you might say, I'm negative, okay? We don't be too hard on yourself. But just finding out wherever you are, because then we're going to set a goal and say, okay, well, if you're a 5 right now in your ability to communicate, if you can get yourself to a 7, what will that take and what will that mean in the benefit of your career? The benefit of in your relationship, so to speak, if you can communicate better. What about an 8? What about a 9? What's it going to take? So we just be clear where we're at and what's required to improve that. Do you realise there's an exam later today? That exam is that everyone has to public speak before you leave. Everyone okay with that? Some of you are excited. Most of you stopped breathing. So I'm only joking. So maybe not. So jot this down. All outstanding communicators do 2 things. If this is all you learn today, then this will be invaluable for you. Outstanding communicators do 2 things. 1, what they do is they share stories. You look at any effective presentation you've been to, they will share stories about themselves and stories about other people. Why? As humans, we love stories. We grew up with the fairy tales, etc. We love reading books because we relate through other stories of other people's lives. We relate to ourselves. So all great, outstanding communicators will share stories. They'll often share stories about their own life so the audience can relate to them. And by sharing those stories, or third-party stories, they can relate to the audience. They can also pass on a message through that story, as opposed to, you look at a communication that's not effective. Who's ever been told what to do? Who's been told what to do before? Okay, and you don't enjoy it. Is that true? No one likes being told what to do. Did you know when you were a child that your parents told you what to do? Okay, and then when you went to school, the teachers told you what to do. Then when you left school, you got a job and your boss told you what to do. Then you got married and then your spouse told you what to do, effectively. So people have been, even subconsciously, it's like so sick of being told what to do. So have you ever tried to communicate or influence someone by saying, you should do this, you should do that. Why don't you do this? How effective is it? If you don't know, try it sometime. Okay, try it on your spouse, try it on your kids. It's just not effective. Often with kids, it's easy to tell them the opposite. Okay. Tell them not to do something that you want them to do, and they'll do it. Okay, because we don't like to be told. So, effective way as a communicator, whether it's just one-on-one communication, is sharing third-party stories. Because in that third-party story, you can share a message about someone else, and it's not telling someone what to do, but the other person will be able to hear that story and go, that makes sense. Okay, or the communication can be in a format of not being attached rather than telling people what to do. If you're talking to children, for instance, I remember an example here in Melbourne some years ago. My sister has 5 children, and I love children. I don't have children yet, but my sister has 5 children, so that's enough for me to catch up and get my dose of having children for a while. And gorgeous children, and I was taking them to the swimming pool. I live here part of the year, just across the road here in Melbourne. I live in Sydney most of the other time. And indoor pool, and about a 5-year-old child and a 3-year-old daughter at the time she had. And they were running around the pool, indoor pool where it's all wet, etc. And I said, don't run around the pool. Okay. And how long did kids pay attention to that for? Because kids are having fun. They're focused on the pleasure running around the pool, etc., having fun. So they didn't listen to that. And then I thought, hang on a minute, I'm meant to be an outstanding communicator. That's not a very effective way to communicate even to children, because if you tell them don't do something, then it's not usually effective. So I simply changed my communication to saying, you know what? It's up to you what you do. You can run around the pool if you wish. However, what's going to happen if you slip and fall over on those hard tiles and concrete? It's up to you. You can run around all you like, but if you fall over and hurt yourself, how much immense pain will you feel? Of course, it's up to you. But you see what I'm doing? By changing the communication to be unattached to the outcome, When you're unattached to an outcome, it's far more effective. And as a result, they thought about that for a moment and they decided themselves to stop running around the pool. Is it making sense? Did they now own that decision? They owned that decision. The other way I could have done that was share a third-party story about other kids that were running around the pool and they were having fun, but they didn't realise it was dangerous and fell over, and they really hurt themselves and started crying and wrecked their whole day, and as a result they missed out on going to the movies and having the ice cream or whatever it is. And you can see now how that third-party story, you're reaching a different communication without telling people don't do something. And that's the value of stories. The other thing that all outstanding communicators do, the second thing they do, so other than share stories, is the second most important thing they do, jot this down, is that they ask questions. Share stories and ask questions. So your presentation, whatever it is, should be predominantly those two things. Asking questions. Why do they ask questions? Is because they want to engage the audience. If you've ever been to a lecture before, so there's a difference between a lecture or even a Toastmasters where someone is effectively trained to present and just present some information. That's very different to communication. Communication is a two-way thing. So communicators ask questions of the audience because it engages people to think. And your role as a communicator is to engage people. Your role is to challenge people to think. So it creates an impact. Otherwise, it's just information. We've all been to, have you been to a university lecture or something like that sort, where people just stand there and read printed notes? How exciting is that as an audience? How long do you last? Because you start tuning out. So really, it's really a waste of time. Okay, or if you go to some CEOs that aren't effective when they're doing a presentation for shareholders or something like that, when they're not effective, it's really just information, and information has no value until someone's owned it or engaged what that means to them. So you can simply ask questions. So often you notice what I will do in my presentations, I'll ask questions like, does that make sense? Or do you agree with this, yes or no? In other words, it's not my role as an educator to teach, to impose my thoughts, my beliefs, my thinking on someone else. My role as a communicator is to challenge people to think for themselves. So that way they own that, whether they agree with this or not. Is that true, for instance? And then people can say, well, is it true? If it's true for them, they can agree with that. If it's not for them, it's not. In other words, so the idea of being unattached, but you're asking those questions. Who agrees with that? And you can put your hand up. And for instance, like that, and people can agree. So what you're now doing is you're engaging the audience. You're engaging them to be thinking for themselves and to own what you're talking about. So you're challenging them to think. So that way, because the process of learning as a communicator and educator, you are educating. So to do that and to get people engaged, you need to ask questions. Making sense? So what you can do, in a moment we'll go through what you can do before a presentation and preparing it, but you should actually look at, and if you go and look at some outstanding communicators, you could actually study their model, their presentation, and you'll find, for instance, if you went to who's been to an Anthony Robbins event, who's had the chance to go to Tony? Now, outstanding communicator. Now, if you go through his event and break down the syntax of what he's saying, the two predominant things you'll see all weekend over a 4-day weekend with Tony is that all he's doing all weekend is what two things? He's sharing stories and he's asking questions. He would ask maybe 1,000 questions over the course of those 4 days. And the power of those questions. And share a lot of stories. Stories about his own life and stories about third parties. Making sense? It's predominantly, so the majority of your presentation should really be about sharing stories to relate to people, so they can also relate to yourself, your own stories. And you look at a lot of effective communicators, they'll share stories about themselves, so people will realize that they're just normal or down to earth, they can relate to that, so they're coming across real, but certainly third-party stories I talked about, but asking questions. Okay, questions are very powerful, because questions engage you to think. So I want you to think about that. Make sense? Okay, so what I might do is I'm going to jump to the syntax, and we're going to walk through the syntax first, and then I'm going to add more things at the end of that will make a lot of sense. So I'm going to jump to the syntax, and then we'll come back and do what we would do before a presentation. Okay, so let's go through the syntax of a presentation, and then we'll come back and say, okay, before you start a presentation, what do you have to do? Prepare beforehand, etc. Make sense? So okay, so the blueprint of a the syntax of a presentation. So this is how you can document a whole presentation. So if you're presenting, one of the best things to do is, it depends on the situation. Sometimes you might be presenting at work in a group setting. Sometimes you may be running your own seminar, etc. It depends in the context of it. But generally, by having an MC to introduce you is always ideal. Because an MC can give you third-party credibility. They can tell the audience a little bit about you, who you are, so the audience will then know who you are. Because now it's different if you're speaking to an audience that already knows you. That's what we call, jot this down, a warm audience. So a warm audience is an audience that already has some prior relationship to you. They know who you are, so you don't need so much the edification process or the introduction because they know who you are. But for many of you who are doing presentations, you'll be doing it to a cold audience. A cold audience is they don't know who you are, and some of them may not particularly care who you are. Okay. So the first process of the presentation is an MC is someone that's going to introduce you. Okay, and their introduction should highlight who you are, your credibility on the topic or whatever you're going to be talking about. Making sense? Because it's much harder to edify yourself when it's much easier for someone else to edify you. Making sense? Okay. Now, when you're first starting speaking, you might go, well, you might think that you don't have any credibility on a topic, and so jot this word down. It's called posture. Posture, and it's so critical. This is, I guess, the frame of reference that you must see yourself through. So it depends, obviously, what topic you're talking about, but I'm going to suggest that ideally you're going to be talking about something you're passionate about and something that you believe in and something that ideally you have knowledge about. But it doesn't matter what it is. Your credibility comes from, it could be some simple things. Okay. For instance, when I was first asked to start speaking on different topics, one of the things was I eliminated a lot of debt. When I was in a lot of debt, I'd learned how to eliminate a lot of debt in a very short period of time, and people wanted to know how to do that. So, for instance, my credibility on that topic was because I had a story, this is what had happened to me, and this is how I eliminated that debt rapidly. And I was teaching people as a strategy, as one strategy is how to eliminate debt. So I could have the credibility on that is because it's something that I'd actually gone through and I'd been very effective at producing a result to get rid of a lot of debt in a short period of time, and that's something the audience wanted to know about. Does that make sense? So I was just focused on that particular thing. Okay? So I felt comfortable and passionate about that because I knew the pain it caused me, and I believed that if I could share how I would learn how to eliminate that debt with someone else, that would benefit them. So I believed in that. I was passionate about it, and I could speak effectively off the top of my head because I had the expertise, because I had a personal experience, I had the credibility because I'd produced that result on that thing. Who's following what I'm saying? Okay, so you don't have to be a guru. You just have to be, if you're talking about how to raise a healthy pet, okay, your credibility might be you have a healthy pet and you have a certain expertise in how you went about having that healthy pet. Okay, and you have a great cozy relationship with your pet and how other people can have that too, and you're passionate about that and you believe in that, and you know the audience that's there wants to know about that, for instance, then you can see there, then you can have an effective presentation on how to have a healthy pet. Making sense? So it's really irrelevant to the topic. Now, if you're talking about something that the audience has no interest in, then you can see how you start to have some challenges. So you must be matched to the audience. Okay. Now, generally, your audience, you'll be matched to an audience, because why would you be invited to speak, or why would you be speaking about something that has no relationship to the audience? But in saying that, sometimes the audience may have a benefit for what you have to hear, but they don't yet recognize that. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, how you go about framing the audience so they actually know what you're going to talk about up front. Make sense? So ideally, in a presentation, you'll have someone that will edify you. So it might even be in a company situation where you might be introduced as the senior sales manager, and he's here to share with you how to increase your sales because he's run one of the most successful sales teams in this part of the company, as an example. That's an edification. Therefore, the audience knows why you're there, etc., and you have some credibility. Because otherwise, if it's a cold audience, people might be sitting there with their arms folded, for instance, and like, well, Why should I listen to him, or why should I listen to her? People are thinking, remember, people thinking, jot this down, what's in it for me? You're flicking through the TV channels, you're looking for something, what channel are you going to watch? Well, what's in it for me? Why should I watch Sex and the City? Okay, what's in it for me? Okay, nothing. So I turn the channel and go to the news station, okay? So that's why on the TV channels, they will have headlines. Those short grabs, 6 o'clock news, Channel 9, breaking news, blah, blah, blah. It's a headline. What they're trying to get you is to tell you right up front why you should tune in and listen, why you should tune in and watch. Does that make sense? So which is the next step, is what we're going to look at in just a moment. So when you start your presentation, you will be doing an intro. Okay? So an introduction, when you first stand up and start talking to the audience, you'll quickly introduce yourself. Generally, that'll be obviously saying what your name is, who you represent, depending on the syntax of the presentation. Then the third step, and we'll come back into some depth over these in a moment. So basically, we're going through a step-by-step process of delivering a presentation to an audience. The third step is what I like to do, and I think is important, is especially, it doesn't matter what audience you're talking to, is often acknowledge and respect what you respect or can acknowledge about the audience. For instance, if you're a senior sales manager and you're being asked to share your strategies of how your office or your team in, let's say you're in another state, has been working really well, and share that knowledge with this state, say in Victoria as an example, then you could obviously introduce yourself and just say, I'm such and such, I'm senior sales manager in Queensland, and I've been asked to come and share with you some ideas that may be of benefit to you. I just want to firstly say, look, I really just want to acknowledge each and every one of you. I know how challenging it can be out there in the current global credit crisis and the tough economic times, and I just want to take my hat off to you for your dedication and commitment, for putting in the time and effort to look at how you can improve results. I also respect that some of you in the room might already be outstanding salespeople, and perhaps even outperforming some of my team or even some of my results. I respect you for that. I also understand some of you in the room may be just starting out and looking for a lot of ideas. So I'm just here not just to share things that have been benefit to myself and my team that I believe can be of benefit to you. And that's where I'm coming from. So if you see the concept there. So you're coming from, you're developing a rapport with the audience, you're respecting them for who they are, because especially imagine in a group like that as an example, there's someone in the back of the room who's a top-notch, Top Gun salesperson, they're going to be there like, why should I listen to this person? But if you respect them and acknowledge them and acknowledge everyone in the room for the different areas, then you're almost asking for permission to share with you. And you're also coming from a position saying, look, I've got some things that may be of benefit to you. They certainly helped myself. They certainly helped other people. If you'd like to, for instance, what I would do, who here would like to be able to increase their sales by 25% by working 50% less? You ask that question. See how I've asked the question. Does that now engage people? Because they're going, would I like to increase my sales by 25% by working 50% less? Yes? So that's the next step we're going to go into. So you acknowledge, you respect the audience. The next step, what we're doing is pre-frames. And the best way to pre-frame is to ask a question. What I just did then, if I was in a senior sales manager role, is I asked the question, who here would like to be able to increase your sales by 25% by working 50% less? That's what we call a pre-frame. It's a news headline. It's a headline telling people why you should watch the 6 o'clock news. Today Tonight do this all the time, don't they? And current affairs. Tune in for Today Tonight and you're going to learn 6 easy ways to slash your credit card bill. Don't miss it. So they're telling you right up front, they're pre-framing you right up front why you should listen. Make sense? Out of any presentation, this is certainly one of the most important parts of a presentation. If you forget other things, just don't forget this. If you do not pre-frame your audience, they will be sitting there for your presentation in the back of their minds thinking, why should I listen? What's in it for me? Making sense? I know some of you are busy writing. So, A pre-frame, jot this down, a pre-frame is a headline. And you should pre-frame everything that you do. You're talking to your children, you want to pre-frame a benefit, why they should listen to you. You want your spouse to marry you, you should pre-frame them what's in it for them. If you want people to listen to you, you should basically what you tell them is the headline right up front, what's in it for them. Now the best way to pre-frame, as I prefer, is to ask questions, because you engage straight away. So whatever topic it is, so if I have to speak, now the difficult thing, if I'm speaking on a topic that I know, I'm passionate about, the easiest things to talk about. And I'll go through that as far as notes and PowerPoints and things like that in a moment. But if it's something you're passionate about, you will find that you can talk a lot longer. A lot of people are, what if I run out of things to say? Okay, now the women in the room don't have to worry about that, okay? Women speak on average about 13,000 words a day to men about 4,000 words a day. So women are natural public speakers. So they generally will not run out of things to say. But if you're speaking on a topic that you're passionate about, it will just flow. So the audience will appreciate that when you're in the zone. I'm very fortunate, I'm a very creative person, so I get on a topic, I can just speak. I can speak for 4 days non-stop, okay? And probably go longer, because I've got so much things I'm excited about, I'm speaking on a topic that I'm interested in. Flows, piece of cake. If I have to be invited to do a presentation that I haven't done before, or talk to an audience that doesn't know me, then you need a lot more of these skills. And many of you will go into terrains like that in the beginning, where you're dealing with a cold audience. You're a little bit uncertain about your credibility, or you're not really as confident, and that it can be far more challenging. So that's where these skills and this blueprint and syntax are so critical. By applying those things and remembering these things, then it puts you in a much stronger position to be effective. And it can take away a lot of that fear as we go through this. And then you can relax and really enjoy it. Okay? So pre-frames, what I will do before any presentation, if I'm creating a brand new presentation, I will create the pre-frames, the main things I'll spend time on. What's 3 or 4 pre-frames that will be of benefit of why you should listen. Okay, if I said to you, who here would like to learn a skill today that can help you make a 6-figure or 7-figure income? 6 figures being 100,000 plus, or 7-figure being $1 million plus income. Who here would be interested in learning a skill that could help you do that today? Does it make sense? Is that a good pre-frame? Has it told you clearly why you should listen? And you're like, yeah, I want to learn that skill. Okay, so that who here would like